I welcome the Badger Army to Exeter. 18 towns and 18 cities that we've covered in the last 6 months with this campaign. It's now the biggest wildlife campaign in Europe, and it is changing the way that politicians, scientists and the media think about this crazy badger cull. When we started this 6 months ago, many people still had sympathy for the National Farmers Union, still thought that Owen Paterson was probably quite an honest man, still believed that David Cameron was doing the right thing. Well, I don't think anyone believes any of that anymore. We know that badger cull makes no sense from an economic point of view. We make it no sense from a scientific perspective. And it definitely doesn't take into account the animal welfare concerns of our badgers. This policy has failed. It's failed in a way that is catastrophic for the relationship that this government has with the public when it comes to the environment and farming. Now, the only issue now is how we stop this and how the politicians accept they got it so wrong. But I'm afraid they're digging in, and they're getting nasty, and they're getting desperate. Now, all of you would have seen the front page of the Daily Mail and the media coverage yesterday about cats and TB. Let me tell you something about that, because I've just been speaking to the Sunday Express, who'll be writing a story tomorrow. Last time that Owen Paterson came into Parliament in October to talk about the badger cull, he mentioned, surprise, surprise, concerns about TB and cats. When the Chief Veterinary Officer has been going around the country and speaking on the rare occasions that he does, the first thing he often mentions is about TB, cats and domestic pets. And surprise, surprise, the Health Protection Agency produces a report which stipulates that there could be a link between some cats getting TB and wildlife, but not mentioning badgers in particular. But within 24 hours, it's on the front page of the Daily Mail, it's all over the media, and your little Tiddles is going to get TB, and it's all down to those nasty badgers. Nice pictures in the Daily Mail of a badger that looks like it's going to bite your hand off, next to a cow, and next to a nice woman who might get infected. Now, who did that? Who played that story into the Daily Mail? I can tell you, it was a political advisor of Mr. Paterson, person that did work in the Countryside Alliance before he got employed by the Secretary of State, playing that demonisation of the badger directly into the media to try and show up this disastrous collapsing policy. Why are they doing that? Why are they willing to risk a huge public health scare, worrying loads of people about cats across this country, when they know there was no evidence to indicate there were badgers involved? I can tell you from the Badger Trust perspective, we have more information on the ecology and badger behaviour in this country than anywhere else. And I can't find anyone that will tell me that badgers fight with cats, that cats are getting wounded by badgers in their gardens, that cats are going down into badger sets. It's just not happening. Cats could be getting infected from TB from wildlife, from foxes, from deer, but also from going into farmland where there is cattle with TB. They could be getting infected because they're drinking unpasteurised milk, which many farm owners still give to their cats. So there are real, genuine issues of concern. But let's not demonise the badger to try and scare people into believing that culling them is justified. And the reason they've got so dirty, the reason they've taken that panic step is because we're winning. In Parliament a few weeks ago, over 280 MPs voted against the badger cull policy. Many of those MPs had sided with it 12 months ago, but they now feel deceived. They now feel that they've been misled by Mr. Cameron, and in many cases their own Prime Minister, the Tory backbenchers like Anne Main in St Albans. And the reason for that is because this whole policy is built on deceit and lies. Let's be clear, we know we have a problem of bovine TB in our cattle, but that's down to our intensive livestock and farming systems. We move over 13 million cattle in this country. We don't have in place effective TB systems in terms of monitoring, control and testing. We don't have in place sufficient biosecurity measures and control measures in terms of movement of those cattle. But what we have done over the last 12 months is we've actually implemented change because the European Commission have forced the UK government and the UK farming industry to do it. And what we've seen has been a massive drop, over 13.6% drop in the UK cattle herds in terms of TB infection. In Dorset, where this crazy Secretary of State and Prime Minister are considering extending this cull, it's fallen by 24.4% in 1 year by doing what farmers should have been doing all the time in the first place. The best, the very best you would ever get by culling badgers, and that's based on the scientific evidence of everyone involved in the randomised badger cull, is you might get a 16% reduction over 9 years in the level of increase in the disease. Well, you've already made a massive contribution beyond that in 1 year by just taking biosecurity measures seriously. We do not need to kill badgers. And we know that the cull policy in Somerset and Gloucestershire was a complete failure. We estimated as Care for the Wild about £7.3 million in January for the cost of those culls. When we look at the latest police costs, when we look at Whitehall costs coming in, it's probably now £10 million was spent killing under 2,000 badgers. That's over £5,000 a badger, the most expensive wildlife cull on record. It was a complete and utter failure. By using free shooting, which is a method they were meant to be monitoring for effectiveness to prove it could work, they killed only in those 6 weeks around 30% of the badgers. The vast majority were killed by government-funded trap teams coming in, trapping the animals overnight and shooting them in the morning. They did not put in place any effective humaneness monitoring. The independent expert panel report this government has been sitting on like a hot potato is an explosive report. What it says is that only a tiny number of those animals were monitored for humaneness, around 100. But of those small number, a large number of those took over 5 minutes to die. Many of them were probably subject to multiple shotgun wounds. Many of them would have moved and died in a long, painful death. And you can see that from what Secret World and Adrian and others did very well, bringing that to the attention of Channel 4 recently through the badgers that they got hold of that the government have been trying to get back for many, many months. Those post-mortems told us that these animals were killed in an inhumane way. They told us that those animals died in a way they should never have died. And they told us that the coal cull is an absolute disgrace when it comes to protecting our wildlife. Now, what are we trying to do here? Yes, we all want to get on top of bovine TB. We need to get on top of it for farmers because it's an economic problem. We need to get on top of it for the taxpayer because it's costing us an awful lot of money. We need to get on top of it for our wildlife because we'll never get rid of this debate about killing our badgers or nearly maybe moving on to killing our deer or killing all our feral cats or any other animal that might get infected. And we also need to get on top of it because there is a very, very small risk of public health concerns, not just from TB cats, but from selling 28,000 TB cattle into our food supply chain every year, that the World Health Organization is now telling the UK government is something they should not be doing. So we do need to get hold of this problem. But what interests me and what I've really found gives me hope for the future since I joined the Badger Trust is the huge amount of public support we have for getting control of this disease. David Cameron came into government talking about the big society. Well, it didn't last very long. It was a good concept, but it fell apart. But you are the big society. You are people that are willing to give up your time and your money and go into fields in the middle of cold, wet nights to vaccinate badgers. You are willing to give up your time to help farmers and landowners who've not really treated you with the respect they should to try and sort out their animal health disease problem. You are willing to help the government to do something that they should be doing on your behalf. Now that is something we should all be proud of. That is something that David Cameron should be biting our hands off to say, we're going to make this work. And in certain parts of the country it is. In places like Somerset, where Adrian is working, or when I was up in Derbyshire a few weeks ago, we were in a room at night, at 9 o'clock at night, with hundreds of people from the Wildlife Trusts and Badger Trusts, with the support of landowners and local NFU representatives and farmers, who are setting up a significant badger vaccination project. Now that is what we're going to be able to do in the future, if we get away from this crazy debate about culling badgers. We know that the number of diseased animals being killed in those culls in Somerset and Gloucestershire was absolutely tiny. Remember, we talked about the randomised badger cull earlier. But when we talk about diseased animals, when we talk about super excretors like Owen Patterson does, he perpetuates this myth that these animals, significant numbers of them are diseased and have to be killed for their own good. The randomised badger cull, of those 11,000 animals killed, only 1.65% of them had late-stage TB, where they were suffering, their health was suffering as a consequence, and where they could spread it to other badgers or cattle. 15% of those animals had low-stage TB. They didn't have significant health problems. They would have lived their natural life without probably passing the disease on, and it was not going to cause a major problem for the badger community. But the vast majority, over 85% of the animals, had no TB at all. And that's why this government have not tested any of the animals during the culls in Somerset and Gloucestershire. Well, we thought they hadn't tested them, but we got a Freedom of Information request came back today saying, actually, we've tested some of them at the request of landowners, but we can't really tell you the results. There's a surprise, because we know none of those animals have got TB. Otherwise, those results would have been held up in Parliament by Mr. Patterson earlier this week. So, we don't have diseased badgers. We've spent an absolute fortune on a badger cull that's been a complete failure. We have caused a huge division between people living in town and city and farmers. And farmers are important. I've worked with them for most of my career and I have respect for them. But they must listen to us as well. They have to work hand in hand to find a solution to this problem. I was very, very disappointed by Morag Raymond, the new president of the NFU, who I've worked with in the past, a Welsh dairy farmer. The first public statement he made about the badger cull was to attack his native Wales, to say that they were basically tying farmers' hands behind their back, that they were following a policy which was going to be disastrous. Excuse me, Morag, you've just blown 10 million quid trying to put 2,000 badgers, the most disastrous policy in 40 years, and in Wales they spent 900,000 basically vaccinating 1,300 animals, all of which were healthy and returned back into the wild. They brought their TB and their herds down by 33%. They've got huge public support. They've got no marches, no division, no big debates in Parliament. Who's got it wrong, Morag? Wales or England? I think England has got it very wrong indeed. And you won't win this debate, Mr. Patterson or Mr. Morag Raymond, by demonising badgers, by causing health scares that don't add up, and by telling people that we are wrong, that we don't understand farmers or their pain or suffering. We do. We're out in this country every single day, up and down, basically telling politicians that we're willing to try and make a change, that we want to try and reach out and make a difference. And that's a critical part of this campaign. We're a caring, compassionate society. And I'll tell you this, I was with our lawyers at the Badger Trust yesterday, we will legally challenge any extension of this badger cull in Gloucestershire, Somerset or Dorset or anywhere else. We will go to the High Court, and we will have huge public political support to do that, and we will do it for one key reason alone. You cannot change all the rules of your badger cull pilots to go on into 2014 from last year. When I say change the rules, you are going to come back probably in a few weeks with a completely different method of shooting and trapping. You're going to change the zone areas where you're going to be killing the badgers. You're going to have differences in terms of monitoring systems put in place. We don't know how many badgers died, for example, in the floods in Somerset. We have no clear understanding of the humaneness issues around what you did to badgers last year in terms of wounding and shooting. Every aspect of this cull needs to be completely reviewed. You cannot extend licenses, you would have to issue new licenses, and you will have to go through a whole new consultation process. And rather than just letting the National Farmers Union sit in on that and close it off to everyone else, you will now have to open up that process to wildlife groups, to conservation groups, to the National Trust, to bodies up and down this country that have genuine concerns and interests in how this policy goes. That will be the crucial basis of a judicial review case. It's a case that will win public support. It's a very reasonable case that we bring. We're saying that time and consideration needs to be given to this, and we need a complete review, which would effectively stop any badger culling this side of the election. It's what the politicians in Westminster genuinely want too. Even those that were pro-cull are beginning to get worried. They know their mailbags are full from people like you telling them this is a terrible policy. They know that some of them could lose their seats on the back of this. And I'll tell you now, the reason you haven't had a decision on this badger cull is because there's been one hell of a row in Cabinet with Nick Clegg saying he doesn't want it. And remember, they lost their battle to weaken the Fox Hunting Act this week for the very same purposes. They thought they were going to have a double whammy. George Eustace, an MP with 66-seat majority in the House, in his Devon seat, in Cornwall seat, sorry, is basically hanging on by a string. He has had enough of being the fall guy for Mr. Patterson, who's got one of the biggest majorities in Parliament and will get elected no matter what next time round. Old George has said, listen, I'm not going to be the whipping boy anymore. I'm not going to lose my seat in Cornwall. I've got a fight on my hands already. I've had enough. You are not going to extend this debate and this cull into Cornwall. And that's one reason that you probably won't see this go into Cornwall when this final decision is made. That's a political reason, nothing to do with the science, nothing to do with animal welfare. But that takes you all the way back to what this policy was about in the first place. This is about playing politics with our wildlife, and that can no longer go on. We cannot allow votes to dictate if animals will live or die. And it doesn't matter if it's foxes to be killed in hunts. It doesn't matter if it's badger culls to be killed in badger culling. It doesn't matter if you're not going to take seriously the threats against raptors like our hen harriers and birds of prey, the most endangered species we have in this country that are poisoned illegally on game and hunting estates in Scotland and other parts of the country. It doesn't matter that you don't want to protect hares because you want to continue to allow them to be shot in huge numbers when they're actually closed seasons in Northern Ireland, Scotland and most of Europe to allow them to breed in peace. These issues do need to be tackled, but every one of them goes to the fundamental relationship that David Cameron came into office with the Countryside Alliance, with the Countryside Landowners Association, with the National Farmers Union. We have a case that was discussed in the High Court yesterday from the Badger Trust, where we've actually got a result from the Information Commissioner to say that we have a right to understand the relationship the National Farmers Union has with this government. You have a TB board that was established, and the NFU has representatives on that board, and we are fighting on your behalf and the public to understand what they do and what influence they have had on this policy. That will come to a hearing in June. Whatever the outcome, we will get more information out about that relationship. We will bring that to the public's mind and the politicians' mind, and we will tell you that that is a damn unhealthy relationship, that you cannot dictate the future of wildlife policy in this country by allowing one organisation, the National Farmers Union, to influence above all else. We need an open, proper system of consultation and scrutiny. We need individuals who care passionately about wildlife, and there are many hundreds of thousands of those, to feel that they can have some influence over that policy process. We are going to have to change the way we do things in this country. This Badger Cull debate is not just about badgers. It's about how we value our countryside and wildlife for the future. What gives me great heart and hope for the future is that tens of thousands of people are coming out onto the streets and towns of our cities, that millions of you are active on petitions and on social media, that we are winning the politicians and the media around to our arguments. The BBC have had to accept this week that they made a mistake. They put out a broadcast on their website back in May 2012 on the Irish Badger Cull, which basically perpetuated a myth that by killing badgers in Ireland, we can prove that we can lower TB in cattle. It took 9 months from one diligent individual to actually get the BBC to accept that they made a mistake with that particular article. Then we've had to fight for them to take the article offline. They still have not, but they have now registered the complaint which they published and accepted that it was misleading and there was not scientific evidence to underpin the argument that culling badgers in Ireland reduced bovine TB in cattle. But that's important, because that goes to the very heart of one of the strongest arguments that Owen Paterson and George Eustace and David Cameron and others have been making to justify this cull. Whenever you pin them down, whenever you push them, they always go back to Ireland, saying, well, we did it in Ireland, we can do it here. No, the Irish government have killed nearly 70% of their badgers. They've shot them, they've snared them, they've gassed them, they've spent vast amounts of money, and they have still not got TB out of their cattle herds. They brought it down, but by no more than we could do here. We've proven to do with biosecurity changes, and what we've achieved north of the border in Northern Ireland doing the same thing as well. We have a belief in care and compassion for wildlife in this country. We do not go out and destroy it needlessly. Now, Owen Paterson might have problems getting his thick head around that, but I don't think most of the public do. I don't think most of the MPs in Parliament do. Most of his colleagues in Cabinet know the man's lazy. They know he has a dangerous, toxic mix of incompetence and arrogance, which has in spades compared to most other politicians of his generation. And he's lost all confidence in the arguments. He knows he's living on borrowed time. He knows that independent expert panel report's like a hand grenade waiting to go off. He knows that most politicians don't want culling in any of their constituencies. Last year he was telling us he was going to push all of you to one side and he was going to cull in 10 new areas in this country this year, and over the next 3 years, if they get re-elected, they would do it up and down the country. 40 to 50 new culling zones. Well, we've all worked out that would probably cost you the best part of £800 million. It would not succeed in reducing bovine TB. It would cause chaos in our countryside. It would destroy what's left of the reputation of British farming. And even he's now had to admit that he's not going to be able to deliver that. And you should all be proud. Those people have been in the fields. Those people have been working with their MPs. Those have been coming to rallies and campaigns. Those have been on social media. All of you be proud that you've achieved so much. You've gone from 10 zones this year to possibly 1. And that one zone in Dorset is becoming very, very difficult indeed for them to deliver, which is why they've sat on it all week. So there is no certainty they're going to be able to deliver that. They're now worried because they know they're going to face a legal challenge. They're now worried because most MPs 12 months out from election don't want badger culling. They know it's going to bleed them votes. They're now worried because the scientific consensus is against them. It was never on their side, but they tried to manipulate data, cherry-pick information, and try and win the media and everyone else around to their arguments. It's you, it's your campaign, it's your efforts, it's your work that has changed that. It's something that we can all be proud of. The caring, compassionate, wildlife-friendly society that Britain is renowned for around the world. We will win this policy. We will win it because we have a proud record of caring for animals in this country, which is why organisations like the RSPCA started here. It's It's why organisations like Compassion in World Farming started here. It's why charities like the Badger Trust and Care for the Wild work so hard. It's why the hunt saboteurs are out every weekend, putting their security at risk to try and protect animals. I'm proud of a society that is willing to do that. I'm proud of a society that's saying, I don't want to be Ireland. I don't want to be the United States. I don't want to be Australia. I want to be Britain. I want something that we can hold on to in what is a rapidly changing country and a society that we can be all proud of. And I think our attitude to wildlife and animals is that very one thing that unites us, and we can all be proud of it. Now, the next few days are going to be interesting. We're going to push back on the TB and cats question. We are going to get an announcement out of this government. You will see a move towards a legal challenge. We're then going to go into a process of chicken. Who's going to blink first? Will this government back down, or will we have to continue to fight all the way? But we cannot rule out culling going on into next summer. And we're going to have to go through the process again. And organisations like GABS and others that are doing so much hard work are going to need your support. The Badger Trust is going to need your support. Care for the Wild is going to need your support. The Hunt Saboteurs are going to need your support. All of them need funding. All of them need members. All of them need people on the ground that can help and motivate and support their campaign activities. Since I've been in the Badger Trust, I've had numerous people call me about illegal killing of badgers. There's a case in the Isle of Wight that some of you might be familiar with at the moment, where the police have not pursued someone that should have been brought to court and fined or imprisoned, in my view, for what they were doing to badgers. We had a badger that was found by the side of the road in Derbyshire the other day that was skinned, physically skinned and left in a horrendous situation. A lady rang me the other day to say she'd come across peanuts in a set that looked like they'd been contaminated with illegal chemicals and left there so badgers could come and eat them. We're getting these types of reports all the time. And we'll continue to work hard with the League Against Cruel Sports and the RSPCA. But the one thing we will also do this year, as well as fight the cull, is begin to really bring wildlife crime up to the top of the agenda in this country. For too long, our politicians, our landowners, our farmers and our police, I'm afraid, have not taken wildlife crime seriously. And it's about time that they did. And whenever a politician goes this year, ahead of those elections next year, we will be bringing wildlife crime to the top of the agenda. We will tell police commissioners and councillors and MPs and prospective candidates for the European Parliament at Westminster, if you don't care about wildlife crime, your constituents do, and they won't be voting for you. We want you to stand up and say we will not accept badgers being illegally gassed by farmers, landowners, or baited by people in the north or anywhere else it might be in this country. We will not accept gamekeepers illegally poisoning birds of prey and hen harriers. Even if it's on hunting estates like Balmoral where the Royals shoot, it's still not acceptable. We will not accept the sort of illegal killing and huge abuse of animal welfare when it comes to shooting hares that we've been seeing in this country for an awful long time as well. We will stand up and say enough is enough. I care passionately about wildlife around the world. When I'm not doing badgers, I work on international issues, particularly on elephants and rhinos and other endangered species in Africa and other parts of the world. This British government has actually done quite a good job on showing leadership on Africa and elephants and rhinos. But isn't it a great shame that it's been willing to do that? But when it comes to Britain, it's been quite happy to spend a fortune butchering our wildlife, and also quite happy to turn the blind eye to illegal wildlife crime. We are making a difference. We are changing the way people think, and we've hugely moved this debate. These badgers are not safe yet, but it's only through people like you coming and standing up and fighting for them. They don't have a voice. They can't set up a political party or a trade union. You are the only thing between these animals that have deserved protection because of the exploitation, abuse and slaughter that has gone on for hundreds of years, between them and more death and destruction across this country. Believe me, there are many who will tell you in the farming industry that they're just trying to get rid of a few diseased badgers and everything will be fine. The stakes are very high. If you allow this badger cull to go on, you will see the eradication of large numbers of badgers from significant parts of this country. They will never come back. A lot of farmers, when you push them, will tell you this. They are demonized this animal so much that they believe the only way they can farm is to eradicate them around every livestock and dairy farm in this country. A complete exclusion zone of these animals. These animals only got TB because cows gave it to them. This was industrial pollution on a scale that we've never seen because of the way that we've done things. And I'm afraid Princess Anne is being quoted in the Radio Times this week saying that she thinks we might have to gas badgers because shooting might not be very humane. Well, I'm sorry, Princess Anne, you're wrong too. You're absolutely wrong when it comes to that. And the problem you have now is that this gassing debate is moving forward as well. And what we've got to do is put a stop to shooting, put a stop to trapping and killing. We've got to move forward with vaccination of badgers, which we can do very well. We've got to move forward with the vaccination of cattle, which can work and will work. We've got to get the food retailers to accept they now have a direct role in improving farming systems in this country, because they created the mess that we're having to live through at the moment. And we have to make sure that any government, be it Conservative, Liberal or Labour, understands that we will not stay silent. We will not sit at home and watch the X Factor and stay indifferent while they go out and destroy our wildlife. We will come out, we will fight, we will make our voices known, we will make it known in the ballot box, and we will stand to protect these animals. I'm proud of that. Keep fighting and we will win. Thank you very much.